I came to comedy because I have a very unorthodox and confusing background, and it was the only way to make sense of it.
So you grew up in Russia, you went to university and studied in the United States after you'd moved to Surrey, I think, in this country. What do you remember about your childhood? What sort of comedy influence did you have there, if any?
I remember growing up, I was watching a lot of Russian student comedy. And then when I moved to Surrey, I started watching American sitcoms. And that was kind of my introduction to American-style comedy.
How would you describe Russian comedy then? Because it's not something that a lot of people in this country would have seen or heard before.
Oh man. Well, first of all, I think it's quite dark and bitter. So a lot of things that Russians laugh at will just horrify anyone outside of Russia. And I think that that kind of dark sense of humor is something that developed during the Soviet Union to cope with the reality of everyday life for people.
So American sitcoms influenced you. Which ones in particular? Because I love American sitcoms. Which are your favourites?
I would say the first one that I watched was 30 Rock from beginning to end.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, if anything, maybe informed my style the most.
There are so many different styles. American sitcoms generally written by teams of writers, which is different to how some sitcoms are written in this country. Any performers that influenced you, particularly in female comedy, Ellen DeGeneres, Roseanne Barr, any of those sort of people?
Yeah, sure. If you put me in the same list as Ellen DeGeneres, I'm definitely not going to be upset about that.
Reasonably new to this then. First show was back in 2016, I think, but obviously in 2018 nominated for Best Newcomer at the Edinburgh Comedy Awards, and you've never really looked back since then on a lot of radio as well, the Mock the Week, the Now Show, and others, and stuff like that as well. How would you describe your comedy style?
This is something that I should be ready to answer, but it's also an incredibly complex question. I think what I would like my comedy to be is describing complex things in a very non-condescending and silly and maybe sometimes quite provocative way.
And computer science certainly features in this. And again, I mentioned that was part of your most important part of your student education in a way. So how do you tie that in with comedy?
Because computer science is something I studied at university, it essentially informed the way that I see the world. I remember having a conversation with another comic, and he studied history in university, and he said he sees everything happening in the world as part of a timeline, because studying history just kind of wired his brain that way. And the way that my brain was wired when I was at university was through computer science, and I see everything as like a tree diagram or like a decision tree, and everything seems logical to me, or if anything, it could be explained by cold hard logic. And I think now that I see the world that way, it's easy to see comedy that way, just because that's how my brain is.
So how do you write your material then?
In the very beginning, when you start doing stand-up comedy, you have to write blurbs for yourself that when you're doing gigs. And I remember sitting down on my maybe like 10th gig and writing down the blurb for myself and just thinking, well, what is the act I want to be? Because currently I'm not an act at all. And I remember writing, she performs cathartic performance art in the privacy of her own home as just like a gag. But now looking back at it, that's essentially what I do. I will like throw myself in very crazy situations in real life on purpose, and then just experience them and then write about them.
Thank you so much for listening to this interview. If you enjoyed it, please click on the like button and ring that notification bell. And there are many, many more to listen to on this channel, so make sure you subscribe if you possibly can. Thank you.